Why the Deathworld Alliance regrets inviting humans becomes clear when maintenance engineer Mara, surviving an assassination attempt, dramatically confronts the Grand Council, presenting irrefutable evidence of Counselor Paloran's biological warfare plot. She invokes the ancient right of impeachment, toppling his authority and proposing a revolutionary overhaul of the thousand-year classification system that had privileged brutality over innovation. The Deathworld Alliance Armistice Station hung in the void like a monument to compromise, gleaming and grandiose from a distance, but held together by prayer and patchwork up close. Its massive central hub, encircled by 12 radiating arms representing each member species, rotated with just enough stability to maintain gravity in the residential sectors. The outer hull, emblazoned with the sigils of a dozen deadly worlds, caught the light of the binary stars that served as the neutral meeting point for the Alliance. Inside, the station's corridors told a different story than its imposing exterior suggested. Gold-plated hallways concealed exposed wiring, Gothic architecture framed hastily installed environmental controls, and ornate council chambers sat directly above utility tunnels that leaked atmospheric gases at an alarming rate. The Deathworld Alliance had prioritized appearance over function, as was typical of an organization more concerned with posturing than practical solutions. Mara Kin was distinctly aware of this disparity as she tightened a valve on the atmospheric regulation system in Maintenance Tunnel 37B. At 35, the former Earth Naval Corps mechanic had the compact build of someone who spent more time squeezing into tight spaces than standing at attention. Her dark hair was cropped short for convenience, and the permanent crease between her eyebrows spoke of years spent squinting at schematics and cursing at malfunctioning equipment. "Come on, you over-designed piece of garbage," she muttered, applying another quarter turn to the valve. The hissing of escaping oxygen finally ceased, and she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "That's better." Her comm unit chirped. "Kin, are you finished with the O2 leak yet? We've got 3 more pressure drops reported in the Malari sector." "Just sealed it," Mara responded, wiping her hands on the already stained maintenance jumpsuit. "Heading there now. Tell the Malari they might want to wear their environmental suits for the next hour until I can verify the fix." "They're not going to like that." "They'll like explosive decompression even less." Mara packed her tools, the organization of her kit reflecting years of experience. Everything in its place. Nothing unnecessary. Earth had taught its children to be practical above all else, a trait that had earned humans a reputation for being resourceful, if somewhat uncouth. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the interstellar community for less than a century. Newcomers compared to most species, who measured their spacefaring histories in millennia. The Deathworld Alliance, a loose confederation of species evolved on particularly hazardous planets, had initially dismissed Earth as an unremarkable world until certain environmental statistics came to light. As Mara made her way through the service tunnels toward the Mulari sector, she reflected on humanity's unusual position. Unlike most species who proudly boasted of their homeworld's dangers, humans had a tendency to underplay Earth's hazards. "It's just a thunderstorm," they'd say about electrical discharges that would devastate other worlds. "Just a cold." They'd shrug about viruses that would constitute planetary emergencies elsewhere. This casual dismissal of danger had initially led the Alliance to categorize Earth as a mid-level threat world, until human physiology and Earth's environmental parameters were more thoroughly studied. The recategorization had caused considerable political upheaval, and now humanity found itself with a seat at a table it hadn't particularly sought. None of this political maneuvering concerned Mara much. She had joined the station's maintenance crew 6 months ago, after leaving Earth's naval service, seeking the higher pay of station work and the relative quiet of a position where most species avoided going. The Byzantine politics of the Alliance were far above her pay grade, and she preferred it that way. As she rounded a corner, A commotion at the end of the corridor caught her attention. A group of station security personnel, massive, armored Raxians, with their characteristic six-limbed gait, were escorting a delegation of what appeared to be high-ranking officials. Mara pressed herself against the wall to let them pass, her eyes downcast as protocol demanded when in the presence of council members. "I'm telling you." The correspondence was clear, one official was saying. A tall, spindly Nozari, whose translucent skin revealed pulsing internal organs. The human delegate was supposed to arrive today for the recategorization committee. "Perhaps their ship was delayed," replied another counselor. This one a Mulari with its characteristic metallic exoskeleton, gleaming under the corridor lights. "The jump point has been unstable lately." The Nozari made a whistling sound of frustration. "This is typical human unreliability. They demand recognition, then fail to participate in the very processes that would formalize their status." Mara kept her expression neutral as the delegation passed. But her mind was working quickly. A human delegate. She hadn't heard anything about an official Earth representative coming to the station. Communications from home were sporadic at best. But something this significant would have been announced to the human residents. Curiosity piqued. She continued toward the Mulari sector, mentally filing away the overheard conversation for later investigation. The universe, it seemed, was once again conspiring to make her job more complicated than it needed to be. The Mulari atmospheric issue turned out to be more challenging than Mara had anticipated. Their sector required a higher nitrogen content and lower oxygen levels than the station's baseline, and the mixing controls had failed spectacularly. 3 hours, and several creative applications of spare parts later, she emerged from their environmental control room, exhausted but successful. As she made her way back to the maintenance bay, she took a shortcut through the diplomatic mail sorting facility, a circular room with hundreds of labeled compartments where communications for various delegations were placed. Most were electronic now, but tradition-bound species still insisted on physical documents for important matters. As she passed, something caught her eye. A gilded envelope lying on the floor beneath the sorting table, apparently fallen and forgotten. The seal was broken, but the elaborate calligraphy on the front was still legible. "To the tribal leader of Earth." Mara snorted. Tribal leader. Earth's unified government had many flaws, but tribal wasn't a term anyone would use to describe the complex bureaucracy that managed humanity's affairs. Someone in the Alliance had a fundamental misunderstanding of Earth's political structure. She picked up the envelope, intending to drop it in the misdirected slot, when the contents slipped partially out. The first line was clearly visible. "Your presence is formally requested at the Deathworld recategorization hearings." So this was the correspondence the officials had been discussing. Clearly, it had never reached its intended recipient. Mara hesitated, then made a decision that would alter the course of interstellar politics in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. She read the entire letter. The missive was formal, flowery, and filled with diplomatic doublespeak. But the essence was clear. The Alliance was reviewing Earth's classification as a death world, and humanity's representatives were expected to defend their planet's status. The hearings would begin tomorrow. Mara carefully refolded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and considered her options. The proper course of action would be to submit it to her supervisor, who would forward it up the chain until it reached someone with the authority to deal with it. By the time that happened, the hearings would be long over. With a sigh that contained equal parts resignation and frustration, Mara pocketed the letter. She would take it directly to the human diplomatic office, small as it was, and let them sort it out. It wasn't her problem, but leaving it unaddressed seemed irresponsible. As she turned to leave, the facility doors hissed open, and 4 Raxian security officers entered, their attention immediately focusing on her. "Human," the lead officer rumbled, his translator giving his voice an unnaturally deep bass. "Identify yourself." Mara Kin, Maintenance Division, she replied, straightening instinctively to her full height, which still left her nearly a meter shorter than the Raxians. Authorized for this section. Level 3 clearance. She held up her station ID badge. The Raxian's compound eyes flickered as he scanned the badge. You are the one we seek. Mara blinked. Me? There must be some mistake. No mistake. You are the only human registered in this sector at this time. The Raxian produced an official-looking tablet. By authority of the High Council, you are hereby designated as the temporary human envoy to the Deathworld Recategorization Committee. What? Mara stared at the tablet being thrust toward her. No. I'm maintenance crew. I fix things. I'm not a diplomat. The Council's summons is not optional, the Raxian stated flatly. Your presence is required at the preliminary hearing in 2 hours. You will come with us now for preparation. But resistance will be noted in the official record. The Raxian's secondary arms moved to rest meaningfully on the weapon at his side. Mara looked from the security officer to the letter in her pocket and back again. Somehow, the universe had decided that finding the misplaced correspondence qualified her as Earth's representative. It was absurd, impossible, and exactly the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that characterized the Alliance. Fine, she said finally, mentally calculating how quickly she could contact someone, anyone, with actual diplomatic authority. Lead the way. The preparation room turned out to be a luxurious chamber the size of Mara's entire maintenance bay, decorated in what someone's alien concept of Earth-style must be. A bizarre mixture of ancient Roman columns, medieval tapestries, and, inexplicably, several potted cacti. A team of attachés, none of them human, bustled around her, attempting to transform the grease-stained mechanic into something resembling a diplomat. Garments of impractical design were presented and rejected. Ceremonial accessories were explained and forgotten, and protocols were recited at such speed that Mara caught perhaps 1 word in 10. The Grand Counselor will expect the traditional greeting of your people, explained a harried Threlk aide, its feathered crest vibrating with anxiety. Which is? Mara asked, genuinely curious about what the Alliance thought humans traditionally did. The raising of the right appendage and utterance of peaceful intent, followed by the ritualistic inquiry about the recipient's temporal state. It took Mara a moment to decipher this. You mean waving and saying hello, how are you? The Threlk consulted its notes. The translation varies, but essentially, yes. Mara suppressed a laugh. I think I can manage that. As the preparations continued, Mara made repeated attempts to explain the mistake and contact the actual human diplomatic corps. Each attempt was politely but firmly redirected, with assurances that all was in order and the Council's decision is final. Finally, with minutes to spare before the hearing, Mara found herself dressed in what appeared to be a naval formal uniform, at least 3 sizes too large and of a rank she had never held. Clutching a hastily assembled datapad of information about Earth and being ushered toward the council chambers. Remember, the Threlk aide whispered as they approached the massive doors. Maintain composure at all times. Show no weakness, but also no aggression. The Deathworld representatives respect strength, tempered with restraint. Fantastic advice, Mara muttered. Any suggestions on how to explain that I'm a mechanic, not a diplomat? Oh, that would be most unwise, the Threlk replied, its crest flattening in alarm. The Council has made its selection. To question it would imply fallibility. Before Mara could respond, the chamber doors swung open, revealing a vast, amphitheater-like room. 12 raised platforms surrounded a central speaking floor, each occupied by representatives of the Alliance's member species. All eyes turned to her as she was announced. The human envoy, representative of Earth, Deathworld aspirant, the chamber herald proclaimed, the translation echoing in multiple languages. Mara stepped forward, acutely aware of the oil stain she hadn't quite managed to remove from her left boot, and the fact that she was about to either commit an interstellar diplomatic incident or somehow bluff her way through the most important meeting of her life. The Grand Counselor, Peloran of the Galatide, rose from the central position, a massive being with iridescent scaled skin and multiple sensor organs that served as eyes. Peloran exuded authority and ancient wisdom. "Welcome, human," the counselor's voice resonated through the chamber. "We acknowledge your presence at these proceedings. Earth's petition for reclassification will be given due consideration." Mara opened her mouth to correct the misunderstanding, then closed it again as she noticed the intensity with which every representative was watching her. This wasn't just a bureaucratic error. There was something else happening here. Some test or evaluation she didn't understand. Making a split-second decision, she straightened to attention and gave a formal Earth naval salute. "On behalf of Earth, I thank the Council for this opportunity." A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Mara couldn't tell if it was approval or disdain, but at least no one had ordered her immediate removal. "The preliminary hearing will now commence," Peloran announced. "The purpose is to establish baseline parameters for the full classification review. Human Envoy, please present Earth's initial statement of position." Mara's mind raced. Initial statement? She had nothing prepared, no official position, no diplomatic training. But she did have one thing: practical knowledge of what it meant to be human in a universe that constantly underestimated her species. "Earth does not seek special treatment," she began, the words forming as she spoke. "We understand that classification systems exist for practical reasons. However, we believe that any system that measures only survival capability without considering adaptation and innovation is inherently flawed." More murmurs, louder this time. The representative from Mulari leaned forward, metallic exoskeleton gleaming. "Are you suggesting the 1,000-year methodology of the Alliance is flawed?" There was no backing down now. "I'm suggesting it's incomplete," Mara replied. "Earth's dangers aren't just in our predators or weather patterns. They're in our microscopic life, our geological instability, our biological diversity. A truly comprehensive system would account for all these factors." "Bold words," commented the Nozari representative, transparent skin pulsing faster. "Perhaps too bold for a species so new to the galactic community." Mara bit back a sharper retort. "Newness doesn't invalidate perspective. Counselor, sometimes fresh eyes see what familiar ones miss." The chamber erupted in multiple conversations, and Peloran had to signal for silence. When order was restored, the Grand Counselor fixed those unsettling sensor organs on Mara. "The human envoy raises interesting points that will be considered during the formal hearings. However, as is traditional with new petitioners, verification of classification status must first be established. The human will undergo the standard trials to confirm their planet's attributes." Mara's blood ran cold. "Trials? 3 tests to verify claimed environmental adaptations," Peloran explained, with what might have been a smile on a human face, but looked decidedly predatory on the Galatide. "Toxicity resistance, pressure adaptation, and the survival maze. Standard procedure for all classification reviews." The Threlk aide leaned close to whisper. "These are normally ceremonial, but given Earth's controversial status claim, they'll make them as difficult as possible," Mara finished under her breath. "Perfect." "Aloud," she said. "When do these trials begin?" "Immediately," Peloran replied. "The Council sees no reason for delay." As Mara was escorted from the chamber, she caught fragments of conversation from the representatives. Impossible standards. Teach the humans humility. Back to their proper place. The message was clear. The trials weren't meant to verify Earth's status. They were designed to disqualify it. Someone on the Council wanted humanity knocked down a peg, And Mara, the accidental diplomat, was the unfortunate test subject. As the doors closed behind her, she allowed herself one moment of pure, undiplomatic language that would have made her naval commander proud. Then, squaring her shoulders, she followed her escort toward whatever impossible challenge awaited. The first trial took place in a sterile laboratory that reminded Mara uncomfortably of a medical bay crossed with an industrial testing facility. Various officials and scientists from different species moved about, preparing equipment and consulting displays. "The toxicity resistance verification is straightforward," explained Dr. Naren Voss, a Threlk scientist whose formal manner contrasted with his clearly excited demeanor. "You will be exposed to a series of compounds common to various Deathworld classifications. Your physiological responses will be measured and compared to established baselines." "Exposed how exactly?" Mara asked, eyeing the various tubes and containers with growing suspicion. "Primarily through controlled skin contact and respiratory introduction," Dr. Voss replied. "Nothing immediately lethal. I assure you, medical intervention is available should your reactions prove excessive." The underlying message wasn't hard to decipher. They expected her to fail, possibly spectacularly. "Let me get this straight," Mara said, crossing her arms. "You're going to poison me and see if I die?" Dr. Voss's feathered crest fluttered in what might have been embarrassment. "A crude characterization, but essentially accurate. The compounds are diluted to appropriate test levels." "And who determines what's appropriate?" "The Council's classification committee, of course. The same committee that wants to downgrade Earth's status." Dr. Voss avoided her gaze. "I am merely following established protocols." Mara sighed. "Of course you are. Let's get this over with." The testing began with skin exposure to various compounds. Mara sat stoically as patches were applied to her arms, each containing substances that would cause severe reactions in most species. Some burned slightly, others itched, but none produced the devastating effects the observers were clearly anticipating. "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Voss, scanning the minimal reactions. "Your integument appears remarkably resistant to corrosives that would dissolve Nozari tissue entirely." "Human skin is pretty tough," Mara replied with forced casualness. "Evolution's good like that." The respiratory tests proved more challenging. Various gases were introduced into a sealed chamber where Mara sat breathing through a specialized mask. Several induced coughing fits. One made her eyes water profusely, and another left her nauseated. But she remained conscious and functioning throughout. As the final compound was cleared from the chamber, Dr. Voss approached with a data tablet, excitement evident in his rapid movements. "Most impressive. Human. Your species shows remarkable resistance to Class 9 and even some Class 10 toxins. The committee will need to review the full data, but preliminary results support a high classification." "So I passed?" Mara asked, still fighting the lingering nausea. "Passed? Oh, this isn't about passing or failing," Dr. Voss explained, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It's about accurate measurement. But yes, you have certainly exceeded minimum thresholds for the claimed classification." As Mara was led to a recovery area, she noticed several council observers in heated discussion. Their body language, alien as it was, conveyed clear disappointment. Round 1, it seemed, had not gone according to their plan. She had little time to rest before the second trial began. The pressure adaptation test took place in a massive chamber that could simulate various atmospheric conditions, from near vacuum to crushing pressures equivalent to deep ocean environments. "This facility replicates the atmospheric conditions of all classified worlds," explained the Mulari technician, Thalia Vrox, her metallic carapace gleaming under the harsh lights. "You will experience graduated pressure changes typical of Deathworld environments. Your physiological responses will be monitored throughout." Unlike Dr. Voss, Thalia made no pretense of scientific neutrality. Her compound eyes regarded Mara with obvious skepticism, and her secondary appendages twitched with barely contained anticipation of failure. "I assume there are safety protocols in place?" Mara asked, as technicians attached monitoring devices to her body. "Of course," Thalia replied. "We wouldn't want an incident to disrupt the proceedings." The test began with a gradual increase in atmospheric pressure. Mara felt the change immediately, a growing heaviness, the air becoming thick and difficult to move through. By the time the pressure reached twice Earth normal, her movements had slowed considerably, and breathing required conscious effort. "Maintaining consciousness at 2.3 standard atmospheres," reported one technician. "Vital signs elevated, but within acceptable parameters." "Increase to level 3, ordered Thalia. The pressure continued to rise. At 3 times Earth normal, Mara found herself hunched over, each breath a laborious process. Her ears had popped painfully several times, and her joints ached with the strain. "Impressive," muttered an observer. "Most Class 8 species would be incapacitated by now." "Temporary adaptation only," Thalia countered. "Continue to level 4. By level 4, 4 times Earth normal pressure, Mara was on her knees, fighting to remain conscious. Her vision had narrowed to a tunnel, and her lungs burned with each shallow breath. The monitoring equipment beeped warnings about her heart rate and blood oxygen levels. "That's enough," called a voice from the observation deck. "The human has demonstrated sufficient pressure tolerance." "The protocol requires testing to failure or level 5, Thalia objected. "And risk a diplomatic incident when she collapses." "I think not." The speaker stepped forward. A Galatide representative Mara didn't recognize. "The data is clear enough. Return to standard pressure." As the crushing weight gradually lifted, Mara remained on her knees, gulping air as her body recovered. When she could finally stand again, she found Thalia regarding her with newfound respect. "You would have reached level 5, the Molari said quietly. "Few non-aquatic species can tolerate such pressures, even briefly." "Was that a compliment?" Mara asked between deep breaths. "An observation," Thalia replied, but her tone had lost its earlier hostility. "Perhaps there is more to humans than we initially assessed. 2 trials down, 1 to go." As Mara was led to the final test chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The first 2 trials had tested physiological limits, straightforward, measurable, objective. But the survival maze suggested something more complex, more unpredictable. She was right. The survival maze occupied an entire section of the station, a massive artificial environment designed to simulate the combined hazards of multiple Deathworlds. As Mara stood at the entrance, a Raxian official provided the briefing. "The objective is simple," he stated. "Reach the exit point within the allotted time. The environment contains hazards equivalent to your claimed classification level. Navigation, resource management, and threat assessment are all part of the evaluation." "What kinds of hazards are we talking about?" Mara asked, eyeing the ominous entrance. "Variable terrain, hostile fauna analogs, extreme temperature zones, limited resources, and psychological stressors." The Raxian listed dispassionately. "All non-lethal, of course, but challenging." "Of course," Mara muttered. "Any equipment provided?" "Basic survival gear consistent with emergency protocols for your classification level." The Raxian gestured to a small pack. "You have 6 hours to reach the exit. Monitoring is continuous. Extraction is available if you signal surrender." Mara examined the pack. A simple water purifier, a multi-tool of alien design, a thermal blanket, and what appeared to be emergency rations. Not much, but better than nothing. "One final note," the Raxian added. "The maze configuration has been personally approved by Grand Counselor Pelorin. It is unique." That didn't sound good. "When do I start?" "Now!" The Raxian pressed a control, and the entrance barrier slid open. Your time begins. Taking a deep breath, Mara stepped into the maze. The initial section seemed designed to disorient. A fog-filled corridor with constantly shifting floor panels that made each step uncertain. Using the wall for guidance, she progressed slowly, listening intently for any sounds that might indicate danger. The fog gradually cleared to reveal a junction with 3 possible paths. No obvious indicators suggested which might be correct. Mara knelt to examine the floor, looking for signs of passage or maintenance. Years of station work had taught her that even the most complex systems left traces of their design logic. There, a slight discoloration in the flooring leading to the rightmost path. The kind that came from more frequent cleaning. Traffic pattern, perhaps. Or maybe just the most direct route requiring more maintenance. Either way, it was a clue. Taking the right path. Mara soon found herself in a jungle-like environment, hot and humid with dense vegetation. The plants looked Earth-like at first glance, but revealed alien characteristics upon closer inspection. Leaves that recoiled from touch, flowers that emitted soft humming sounds, and bark with geometric patterns, too regular to be natural. As she pushed through the foliage, a rustling sound to her left was the only warning before something launched itself at her face. Acting on instinct, Mara ducked and rolled, coming up with a multi-tool in hand. Her attacker, a creature resembling a cross between a spider and a flying squirrel, chittered angrily from a nearby branch. 6 compound eyes tracked her movements as it prepared for another leap. Mara assessed her options quickly. The creature was small, probably not lethal on its own, but who knew what toxins it might carry? Fighting it seemed unnecessary. Evading it was the more efficient choice. Backing away slowly, she used the thermal blanket to create a makeshift shield, holding it between herself and the creature as she retreated. The animal followed for a short distance, then apparently lost interest when she crossed into a different environmental zone. The jungle gave way to a rocky landscape with sparse vegetation and noticeably thinner air. Mara felt the change immediately, a slight lightheadedness and increased respiratory rate as her body adjusted to the lower oxygen content. Altitude simulation, she muttered to herself. Clever. The path ahead wound through a narrow canyon, its walls lined with what appeared to be nest-like structures. Experience had taught Mara that confined spaces with signs of habitation were best approached with extreme caution. Using loose rocks, she triggered several nests from a safe distance, confirming her suspicions when swarms of insect-like creatures erupted at the disturbance. Their stinger-tipped abdomens left little doubt about their defensive capabilities. Rather than attempt to navigate the canyon, Mara studied the terrain and opted for a more challenging but potentially safer route, scaling the canyon wall to travel above the nesting sites. The climb was difficult, especially in the thin air, but her naval training had included mountain warfare modules. Finding handholds in the artificial rock face, she made steady progress upward until she reached a narrow ledge that ran the length of the canyon. From her elevated position, she could see more of the maze's layout. The exit appeared to be on the far side of what looked like a water hazard, a large lake or river crossing with no visible bridge. Time was a factor now. She'd spent nearly 2 hours navigating the first sections, leaving 4 to cross the remaining obstacles. Picking up her pace, she followed the ledge until it descended back to ground level beyond the canyon. The next zone surprised her. A snow-covered landscape with biting wind and temperatures well below freezing. The rapid transition from jungle heat to Arctic cold was jarring, designed to stress her body's adaptive systems. Mara unwrapped the thermal blanket, configuring it as a poncho to preserve core heat while allowing movement. The ration bars from her pack proved useful, not just for nutrition, but as quick energy to combat the cold's drain on her reserves. As she trudged through the snow, visibility decreased as a blizzard intensified. Navigation became increasingly difficult, with few landmarks visible through the swirling white. Mara relied on her training again, using the wind direction as a constant reference point to maintain her heading. The cold sapped her strength more quickly than she'd anticipated. By the time she reached the edge of the freezing zone, her extremities were numb and her movement sluggish. A rest was tempting but dangerous. Stopping in such conditions often meant not starting again. The water obstacle she'd glimpsed earlier now lay directly in her path. A wide, swift-flowing river with no obvious crossing point. The far shore held the exit portal, tantalizingly visible but seemingly unreachable. Mara checked her time. Just under 3 hours remaining. Swimming was possible but risky. The cold water would accelerate hypothermia, and the current looked treacherous. There had to be an intended solution. Searching along the riverbank, she found a section where several fallen trees created a partial dam. The logs weren't positioned to allow crossing, but with some rearrangement. Using the multi-tool and her own body weight, Mara managed to shift several of the smaller logs, creating a precarious but passable bridge across the narrowest section of the river. The work was exhausting, and twice she nearly fell into the frigid water, but eventually, a viable crossing took shape. The makeshift bridge held barely as she inched across, careful to distribute her weight evenly on the unstable surface. Halfway across, one log shifted suddenly, and Mara found herself waist-deep in the icy river, clinging to the remaining structure to avoid being swept away. With a supreme effort, she pulled herself back onto the logs and completed the crossing, emerging on the far bank shivering violently and with numb legs. The exit was visible now, perhaps half a kilometer, through what appeared to be a relatively benign grassland area. Too benign, in fact. After the escalating challenges of the previous zones, an easy, final approach seemed suspicious. Moving cautiously, Mara tested the ground ahead of her with each step. Her caution proved warranted when the earth suddenly gave way beneath a probing foot, revealing a concealed pit lined with sharp spikes. Similar traps might be hidden throughout the seemingly innocent terrain. With time running short and her body weakening from cold and exertion, Mara needed a way to detect the traps without triggering them. Inspiration came from her maintenance experience, pressure differentials, and air movement. Taking the water purifier from her pack, she disassembled it, removing the small air pump component. By attaching it to the tube and reversing the flow, she created a rudimentary blower that could propel small objects. Using pebbles from the riverbank as ammunition, she methodically cleared a path, firing the improvised launcher to trigger traps from a safe distance. The technique wasn't perfect. Several times she nearly stepped into pits that her method had missed, but it allowed steady progress toward the exit. With less than 30 minutes remaining on her time limit, Mara finally reached the exit portal, exhausted, injured, but successful. As she stepped through, the artificial environment dissolved around her, returning to the sterile testing chamber where officials waited with varying expressions of surprise, respect, and in some cases, clear disappointment. "The human has completed the survival maze," announced the Raxian administrator, his tone neutral, but his compound eyes betraying surprise. Completion time, 5 hours, 33 minutes. Thalia Vrox stepped forward, her metallic exoskeleton clicking softly. "You used unorthodox methods. The bridge construction and trap detection device were creative solutions not anticipated in the standard assessment." "I used what was available," Mara replied simply, still shivering from her river immersion. "That's what survival is." "Indeed." A new voice joined the conversation as Grand Counselor Pelorin entered the chamber. "Most interesting approaches. Human. Not the brute force methods we expected from your kind." Mara straightened despite her exhaustion. "Humans don't survive by overpowering our environment. Counselor, we adapt to it, understand it, and work with what it gives us." So it seems. Paloran's sensor organs focused intently on her. The preliminary trials are concluded. The full council will convene tomorrow to review the findings and continue the classification hearings. You have performed adequately. From a being like Paloran, that was practically effusive praise. As the Grand Counselor departed, Thalia remained behind, regarding Mara with what seemed like newfound respect. The maze was configured for failure, the Mulari said quietly. No previous candidate has completed the combination of hazards you faced. Why tell me this? Mara asked. Because the Council is divided on Earth's status. Some see humans as dangerous upstarts needing humbling. Others recognize potential allies. Your performance today has complicated matters. I'm just doing my job, Mara replied. Then laughed softly at the absurdity of the statement. Her job was fixing environmental systems, not navigating diplomatic minefields and literal death traps. Perhaps that is why you succeeded, Thalia observed. You approach problems as problems, not as political statements. After medical treatment for her various injuries and exposure, Mara was escorted to quarters far more luxurious than her maintenance compartment. The irony wasn't lost on her. It had taken nearly dying 3 times to earn an upgrade from her utility closet of a room. As she attempted to rest before the next day's council session, her personal comm unit chirped with an incoming message, the first communication from the actual human diplomatic corps since this fiasco began. Maintenance Specialist Kin, began the terse message. Your situation has come to our attention. While highly irregular, the Council's designation of you as temporary envoy cannot be challenged without significant diplomatic repercussions. Continue in your assigned role until formal replacements can be arranged. Briefing materials attached. Do not, under any circumstances, concede Earth's Class 12 status. That was it. No offer of assistance. No advice on navigating council politics. Just an order to hold the line until the professionals arrived. Typical bureaucratic response. Acknowledge the problem. Provide minimal support. Expect maximum results. The attached briefing materials proved equally unhelpful. Standard information about Earth's environmental parameters that Mara already knew from living there. Plus, ceremonial protocols she'd already violated a dozen times over. Frustrated, she tossed the comm unit aside and lay back on the too-soft diplomatic bed. If she was going to continue this charade, she needed better information, not about Earth, but about the Council and the real politics behind this classification review. And she knew exactly where to find it. The maintenance levels never slept. Even in the station's artificial night cycle, essential systems required monitoring and repair. Security was minimal. Most species considered maintenance work beneath their dignity and paid little attention to the cramped corridors and access tunnels that kept them alive. Mara, still sore from the day's trials, but driven by necessity, made her way through these familiar passages to Maintenance Hub 7, where the overnight shift would be well into their work rotation. As expected, she found Jek Tar hunched over a diagnostic console, his 6-fingered hands moving with practiced efficiency across the controls. As head of the technical crew, Jek had access to information that never reached official channels, the real data about station operations and the beings who controlled it. "You're supposed to be dead," he commented, without looking up as Mara entered. "Or at least humiliated and disqualified." "Sorry to disappoint," she replied, dropping into the chair beside him. "How did you know about the trials?" "Everyone knows." Jek finally turned to face her, his leathery face creasing in what passed for a smile among his species. "The betting pools were quite active. I made a tidy profit on your survival. By the way." "Glad to be of service," Mara said dryly. "I need information. Jek, what's really going on with this classification review?" Jek's expression grew serious. "Politics, as usual. But dangerous politics." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "The Council fears Earth, Mara. Not just your planet's conditions, but what your species represents. Which is what exactly? Unpredictability. Adaptability. Most species evolve to perfectly fit their environmental niche. Humans. He shrugged his narrow shoulders. Humans change their environment to fit them, and when they can't, they change themselves instead. It's unsettling to the established order. So this whole review is about putting us in our place. For some counselors, yes, particularly Paloran and his faction. They want Earth downgraded to Class 9 or 10. Respectable, but not elite. Jek manipulated the console, bringing up restricted files. Others see humans as potential allies against the more aggressive Deathworld species. The Mulari, for instance, have been quietly supportive. Thalia Vrox, Mara said, remembering the Mulari officials' unexpected candor. One of their more progressive representatives, Jek confirmed. But even she walks a careful line. The traditional factions hold significant power. What happens at tomorrow's session? Mara asked, scanning the files Jek had accessed. Formal testimony, evidence presentation, and probably more tests designed to undermine Earth's case. Jek hesitated, then added, there's something else. Rumors in the lower levels suggest more than just classification is at stake. Some say Paloran's faction wants to restrict human expansion rights based on the outcome. Expansion rights? They can't do that legally without proving humans are a destabilizing influence? Jek finished. That's exactly what they're trying to establish with these proceedings. The implications were staggering. If Earth lost its Class 12 status and was deemed a stability risk, the Alliance could legally restrict human colony development and even technology sharing under the original treaty terms. I need to get this information to the diplomatic corps, Mara said, standing abruptly. I wouldn't, Jek warned. Communications to Earth are being monitored. Any message you send will be reviewed by Paloran's people before it reaches your government. Then what am I supposed to do? I'm a mechanic, not a diplomat. Perhaps that's exactly why you were chosen, Jek suggested. Not by the Council, but by circumstance. They expected a professional diplomat they could tangle in procedural webs. Instead, they got you. Someone who sees problems and fixes them. This isn't a faulty oxygen valve, Jek. It's interstellar politics. Is it so different? Both involve pressure, flow, and the occasional need to bypass clogged systems. Jek's face creased again in that alien smile. Besides, you've already survived their impossible maze. What's one more challenge? Before Mara could respond, her comm unit buzzed with an official summons. Her presence was required in the medical bay for standard post-trial evaluation. At this hour? She questioned, checking the time, well past midnight in station cycles. Jek's expression turned grave. Be careful, Mara. Standard evaluations don't happen in the middle of sleep cycles. With a growing sense of unease, Mara made her way to the medical facility. Unlike the bustling daytime operation, the night shift consisted of a single attendant, a Nozari medical technician whose transparent skin revealed nervous pulses of bioluminescent organs. Human envoy, the technician greeted her. Please proceed to examination room 3 for your evaluation. What kind of evaluation requires middle-of-the-night timing? Mara asked, making no move toward the indicated room. Merely routine monitoring following environmental exposure, the Nozari replied, not meeting her gaze. Council protocol for all trial participants. It sounded reasonable enough. But Jek's warning and the technician's obvious discomfort triggered Mara's suspicions. I'd like to see the authorization for this procedure. The Nozari hesitated, internal organs pulsing more rapidly. It should be on file. One moment. As the technician turned to access a terminal, Mara noticed something odd. A sealed container on the medical tray labeled in Galatide script. Her knowledge of the language was limited to maintenance warnings, but one symbol was unmistakable. The hazard marking for extreme biological contaminants. The pieces clicked together with alarming clarity. This wasn't a medical evaluation. It was a setup. Someone had arranged for her to be exposed to something dangerous enough to require quarantine. Or worse. "Actually," she said, backing toward the door, "I'm feeling much better. Let's reschedule." The Nozari spun around, alarm evident in its posture. "You cannot leave. The procedure is mandatory." "So is my continued existence," Mara replied, then turned and ran. She made it 3 corridors before security alerts began blaring. The station's public announcement system activated. Security alert. Detain human diplomat for medical quarantine. Approach with caution. Potential biohazard. Perfect. Now she was being hunted as a danger to the station. Whoever had arranged this had covered their bases well. Thinking quickly, Mara ducked into a maintenance access tunnel. These passages were her domain, and she knew routes that wouldn't appear on security tracking systems. Moving as rapidly as caution allowed, she made her way toward the diplomatic sector, where her assigned quarters might offer temporary sanctuary. The diplomatic wing was on heightened alert when she arrived, but the service entrance she chose was minimally guarded. Using her maintenance override codes, she bypassed the security lock and slipped into the utility corridor that ran behind the guest quarters. From there, accessing her assigned room through the environmental control panel was simple enough. Once inside, she secured the door and considered her options. She needed evidence of the attempted sabotage, but more importantly, she needed protection. Someone on the council, likely Pelorin's faction, had just tried to eliminate her through medical means. Their next attempt might be less subtle. Her comm unit buzzed again, this time with a message from an unexpected source. Thalia Vrox. Human envoy. The message read, "Your life is in danger. The Galatide faction has authorized extreme measures to ensure Earth's petition fails. Seek sanctuary with the Mulari delegation immediately. We can protect you until the formal hearing." It could be another trap, of course. But Thalia had been the only council representative to show her any fairness during the trials. With limited options and station security closing in, Mara made her decision. Using the maintenance tunnels again, she made her way to the Mulari sector. Unlike the opulent Galatide areas, the Mulari preferred functional efficiency. Their living spaces were angular, metallic, and meticulously organized. Security was present but less ostentatious, focused on practical coverage rather than intimidating display. Thalia herself met Mara at the service entrance, her metallic exoskeleton gleaming dully in the low light. "You were wise to come," the Mulari said without preamble. "Pelorin has authorized your detention as a biological threat to the station. The evidence is, of course, fabricated." "Why help me?" Mara asked, still wary. "What do the Mulari gain?" "Balance," Thalia replied simply. "The Deathworld Alliance functions through equilibrium of power. If Earth is downgraded and restricted, the Galatide faction gains too much influence. We prefer distributed authority. Political self-interest, then, not altruism, but at least a motive Mara could understand and believe." "What happens now?" "Now," Thalia said, leading her deeper into the Mulari sector. "We prepare your case for tomorrow's hearing. Pelorin has overplayed his hand with this assassination attempt. If we can prove it before the full council, his petition to downgrade Earth will collapse." "And how exactly do we prove it?" Mara asked. "I doubt the medical bay keeps surveillance records of planned murders." "Perhaps not," Thalia agreed. "But all station environmental systems are continuously monitored for contamination. If someone prepared a biological agent, traces would be detected and logged." Mara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The atmospheric regulation systems. They're designed to identify and filter any biological or chemical agents that could threaten the station. "Precisely. And who would have access to those monitoring logs?" "Maintenance," Mara said, a smile slowly forming. "And I happen to know the head of the maintenance crew." Thalia's compound eyes gleamed with what might have been approval. I begin to understand why your species is classified as dangerous. Human. You see connections others miss. With Thalia's protection, Mara was able to contact Jek securely. The maintenance chief needed little explanation before agreeing to access the environmental monitoring logs for the medical bay. They were sloppy, Jek reported after completing his search. The system detected an unknown biological compound in Examination Room 3, approximately 1 hour before your scheduled evaluation. The automatic alert was manually overridden using counselor-level authorization. Can you trace the authorization? Mara asked. Already did. It came from Pelorin's office. It was the evidence they needed. But Mara knew it wouldn't be enough on its own. Counselor-level authorizations could be disputed or claimed as forgeries. They needed something more definitive. What about the compound itself? She asked. Did the system identify it? Partially, Jek replied. It registered as a synthetic pathogen with structural similarities to several Class 11 and 12 Deathworld viruses, specifically designed to target mammalian respiratory systems. They created a custom virus to make it look like I brought a contagion on board. Mara realized. If I'd been infected, they could claim Earth was misrepresenting its pathogen levels. And justify immediate quarantine of all human representatives, Thalia added. Effectively removing Earth from the classification proceedings altogether. We need the physical evidence, Mara decided. That container I saw in the medical bay, if we can secure it and prove what's inside. Too dangerous, Thalia objected. Security will be watching the medical facility closely now. Not all of it, Mara countered. The primary bay, yes. But the secondary lab where they'd actually create something like this? That would be more discreet. She turned to Jek. Where's the specialized biocontainment lab on this station? Level 37, Section C, he replied without hesitation. Adjacent to the Galatide research facilities. Heavily restricted access. But connected to the maintenance tunnels, Mara guessed. Because everything on this station is eventually going to need fixing. Jek's expression confirmed her suspicion. There's an access point for emergency decontamination systems. It's not designed for personnel entry, but for someone small and determined, it might work, Mara finished. I need to get into that lab. Thalia's metallic appendages clicked, in what sounded like alarm. This is recklessly dangerous, human. If you're caught. If I'm not caught. We have concrete evidence of attempted assassination and biological warfare. Worth the risk, wouldn't you say? After extensive debate and careful planning, a strategy emerged. Thalia would attend an emergency session of the Security Council called to address the human biohazard threat, keeping key officials distracted. Jek would monitor and temporarily disable specific security systems, creating a narrow window of opportunity. And Mara would do what humans apparently did best, adapt to impossible circumstances and somehow survive. The plan was executed with precision. Mara navigated the maintenance tunnels to Level 37, using Jek's access codes to bypass restricted sections. The emergency decontamination access proved as tight a squeeze as expected, a passage designed for robotic cleaning units. Not humanoid bodies, but Mara's lean frame and determination saw her through. The biocontainment lab beyond was sterile, pristine, and mercifully unoccupied. Working quickly, she located the storage units where experimental compounds would be kept. Most were locked with biometric security, but one, recently used, judging by the activity log, responded to a general medical override that Jek had provided. Inside, she found what she was looking for, a sealed container identical to the one she'd spotted in the medical bay, complete with Galatide hazard markings. The label confirmed Jek's analysis, a synthetic pathogen designed to target mammalian respiratory systems with a specific protein marker that would link it to Earth's biosphere. Using equipment from her maintenance kit, Mara collected a secure sample of the container's exterior. Careful, not to breach the actual pathogen vessel. Even trace evidence would be enough to establish the compound's existence and purpose. Her exit went as smoothly as her entry, and within 2 hours, she was back in the Malari sector, evidence in hand and a growing sense of grim satisfaction. The attempt to eliminate her had provided exactly the ammunition needed to counter Paloran's machinations. "We must proceed carefully," Thalia cautioned, as they prepared for the next day's hearing. "Paloran will deny everything. The evidence must be presented in a way that leaves no room for political maneuvering." "Then we don't give him time to maneuver," Mara replied. "We present it at the beginning of the session, before the formal classification review even starts." "A bold strategy," Thalia observed, "but procedurally irregular." "So is attempted murder," Mara pointed out. "Sometimes you have to bypass the clogged systems." As the station's artificial dawn cycle began, Mara prepared for what would likely be the most important meeting of her life, and possibly the most significant diplomatic confrontation in Earth's brief interstellar history. The maintenance engineer turned accidental diplomat had survived physiological trials, environmental challenges, and an assassination attempt. The coming political battlefield would test different skills entirely. The Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity as Mara entered, flanked by Thalia and 2 Mulari security officers. Representatives from all 12 Deathworld species were present, along with numerous observers, technicians, and support staff. At the center of the chamber, Grand Counselor Paloran presided with imperious confidence, his sensor organs sweeping the room. "The Council recognizes the human envoy," Paloran announced, his translated voice carrying a note of surprise at Mara's appearance. "We had received reports of a medical emergency." "Reports greatly exaggerated," Mara replied, her voice steady despite the tension coursing through her. "In fact, those reports are the reason I must address the Council before the scheduled proceedings begin." Murmurs ran through the assembled representatives. Paloran's sensor organs focused intently on Mara. "The agenda has been established," he stated firmly. "Procedural matters must be addressed through proper channels." "This is not a procedural matter, Grand Counselor," Mara countered. "It is a matter of council integrity and justice. I invoke the right of impeachment." The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. The right of impeachment was rarely used, a founding provision of the alliance that allowed any recognized representative to formally accuse a council member of corruption or actions against the alliance's founding principles. Paloran's physical reaction was subtle but unmistakable. A ripple of color across his scaled skin that Mara had learned indicated alarm. "Order!" he commanded, bringing the chamber back to reluctant silence. "The human envoy is new to our protocols and clearly misunderstands the gravity of such an invocation." "I understand perfectly," Mara replied, stepping forward to the central speaking position. "I formally accuse Counselor Paloran of the Galatide of attempted assassination, biological warfare, and corruption of alliance proceedings." The chamber exploded again, this time with reactions ranging from outrage to stunned disbelief. Paloran rose to his full impressive height, his color now shifting to patterns indicating fury. "These are absurd accusations without foundation," he thundered. "The human clearly seeks to distract from the classification review with theatrical displays." "I have evidence," Mara stated simply, her voice cutting through the chaos. She gestured, and Thalia stepped forward with the secure sample container and data tablet. "Biological, digital, and testimonial evidence of a coordinated attempt to infect me with a synthetic pathogen designed to discredit Earth's classification petition." The Nozari representative rose, internal organs pulsing rapidly. "The Council will hear this evidence before proceeding. Serious accusations require immediate investigation." Other representatives quickly agreed, overriding Paloran's attempts to dismiss the matter. The evidence was presented methodically. JEC's atmospheric monitoring logs showing the presence of the pathogen and the counselor-level override. the sample from the biocontainment lab with its Galatide markings, and finally, witness statements from the Mulari observation team, who had documented the unusual medical evaluation scheduling. As the evidence mounted, Palorin's position visibly weakened. His initial denials gave way to procedural objections, which in turn collapsed under the weight of the documentation. These actions, Mara concluded, addressing the full council rather than just Palorin, reveal a fundamental corruption of the classification process. Earth's petition has not been evaluated fairly, but has instead been targeted for failure through methods that violate the Alliance's most basic principles of justice and cooperation. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as her words sank in. The Mulari representative was the first to respond. I move for immediate suspension of Grand Counselor Palorin, pending full investigation of these charges. The evidence presented meets the threshold for impeachment proceedings. The motion was quickly seconded by the Nozari and several other representatives. Palorin, recognizing the shifting tide, attempted one final defense. Even if irregularities occurred in the testing protocols, which I do not concede, the fact remains that Earth's classification must be decided based on objective criteria. The petition process must continue under proper leadership. I agree, Mara said, surprising many. Earth's classification should be determined fairly and objectively, but not by a system that has proven itself vulnerable to manipulation and prejudice. She stepped forward again, addressing the entire council with newfound authority. I propose a reformation of the classification methodology itself. The current system measures only a planet's capacity to kill, not its inhabitants' capacity to live, create, and cooperate. It rewards evolutionary brutality over adaptive intelligence. Murmurs of both agreement and objection rippled through the chamber. But Mara continued, her confidence growing with each word. Earth does not seek special treatment. We ask only for a system that recognizes all forms of environmental challenge, from geological instability to microbial complexity to atmospheric composition. A truly comprehensive classification would acknowledge that there are many ways for a world to be deadly, and many ways for its inhabitants to survive. The Threlk representative tilted his feathered head. You propose a complete overhaul of a 1,000-year methodology, based on one disputed case? I propose a review committee, Mara clarified. A diverse group representing multiple evolutionary approaches, tasked with updating the classification criteria to reflect the full spectrum of environmental challenges and adaptive responses. Earth would be but one case study among many. The chamber fell silent again as the representatives considered her proposal. It was Thalia who finally spoke, her metallic voice resonating clearly. The Mulari support this motion. Our own world has often been undervalued because its metallic toxicity does not register appropriately in the current system. A more comprehensive methodology would benefit many members. One by one, other representatives voiced their positions. The Nozari, whose transparent physiology had evolved under extreme radiation conditions, strongly supported the reform. The Raxians, whose physical prowess had always been well served by the current system, objected. Others fell somewhere in between, recognizing the potential benefits while concerned about disrupting established hierarchies. In the end, the council remained divided, but a majority emerged in favor of establishing a review committee. Palorin, his authority severely undermined by the impeachment proceedings, could only watch as the motion passed. The Classification Reform Committee will be established, announced the Nozari representative, who had assumed temporary leadership of the session. Representatives from all member species will be appointed within one planetary cycle. The human envoy, having raised these important concerns, will serve as committee chairperson. Mara blinked in surprise. Chairperson? I'm not... The most qualified? Thalia interrupted smoothly. Perhaps not in diplomatic experience, but you have demonstrated remarkable insight into the flaws of our current system, as well as the courage to challenge entrenched power. Those qualities are precisely what this committee requires. Trapped by her own success, Mara could only nod in reluctant acceptance. What had begun as a case of mistaken identity had somehow transformed into a legitimate appointment, though still not the one originally intended. As the council session concluded, with Paloran being escorted to restricted quarters, pending investigation, and the details of the new committee being formalized, Mara found herself surrounded by representatives eager to discuss their world's unique challenges and how the classification system might better reflect them. Hours later, exhausted but triumphant, she finally escaped to a quiet corridor. Jack found her there, his leathery face creased in what she now recognized as his species' version of a grin. "Committee chairperson," he said, offering a formal bow that was only slightly mocking. "Quite a promotion from fixing oxygen leaks."
"Don't remind me," Mara groaned. "I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to do my job. And yet, here you are, the human who upended 1,000 years of interstellar politics because someone dropped a letter on the floor. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous."
"Most important historical events do, in retrospect," Jack observed. "The universe rarely follows logical paths." "Speaking of paths," Mara said, straightening, "I should get back to maintenance. Those Mulari atmospheric regulators won't fix themselves." Jack tilted his head in confusion. "You're not serious. You're a diplomatic representative now, with quarters in the council sector and a staff at your disposal."
"And I'm also the only person on this station who knows how to properly calibrate the environmental systems for 6 different species requirements," Mara countered. "The committee work is important, but so is making sure everyone can breathe."
"Humans," Jack sighed, but there was genuine admiration in his voice. "Always finding the practical angle." In the days that followed, Mara established a unique routine. Mornings were dedicated to committee work, organizing research teams, establishing new classification parameters, mediating between species with radically different evolutionary perspectives. Afternoons found her in maintenance overalls, personally inspecting critical systems and training her replacement technicians. The diplomatic corps finally sent their official representative, a polished, experienced ambassador who arrived expecting to take over the committee leadership, only to find the council unanimously insistent on retaining the unique perspective of the maintenance engineer who had exposed corruption at the highest levels. 1 month after the fateful council session, Mara stood in the Climate Control Center, making final adjustments to the atmospheric composition in the newly designated committee chambers. The preliminary reform proposal had been approved, shifting the Deathworld classification from a simple hazard rating to a multidimensional analysis of environmental challenges and evolutionary responses. As she closed the control panel, Mara smiled at the irony. In seeking to diminish Earth's standing, Paloran had inadvertently elevated humanity's position within the Alliance. More importantly, he had forced a re-evaluation of what truly mattered in interspecies relations, not just the ability to survive hostile conditions, but the capacity to adapt, innovate, and cooperate. The comm unit on her belt chirped. "Chairperson Kin, the committee is assembling for the presentation of the preliminary findings." "On my way," she replied, taking one last look at the environmental controls, the literal mechanism that allowed diverse species to share the same space despite their different needs. An apt metaphor for the work she now found herself leading. As she made her way to the committee chamber, Mara passed the station's observation deck. Through the massive viewport, distant Earth was just visible, a small blue dot orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. From this distance, it looked peaceful, almost benign, its storms, earthquakes, predators, and pathogens invisible. But Mara knew better. Earth was dangerous, unforgiving, and constantly changing, just like the universe itself. Perhaps that was humanity's true strength. Not that they had conquered their deadly homeworld, but that they had learned to live with its dangers, adapt to its challenges, and still look to the stars with curiosity instead of fear. The Deathworld Alliance had invited humans to the table expecting submission. Instead, they had gotten innovation. They had expected a diplomat and gotten a mechanic, someone who saw broken systems and fixed them. As Mara entered the committee chamber to a round of alien gestures of respect, she allowed herself a small smile. The universe, like the station's environmental systems, was complex, interconnected, and occasionally malfunctioning. But with the right tools, the right perspective, and a healthy disregard for the way things have always been done, even the most daunting problems could be solved. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was solving problems that everyone else considered impossible. The Council would likely regret inviting humans to their alliance. But in time, they might also come to appreciate the advantage of having someone around who knew how to fix what was broken. Whether it was an oxygen valve, a classification system, or an interstellar political body in desperate need of reform. After all, in Mara's experience, everything eventually needed maintenance.